Ajnana-timirandasya Vinanjana Salakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Visakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Priya Bhanusate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaevacha Patitanam Bhavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Rasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paschachate Satarane. Hare Krishna. So yeah, we're finishing, hopefully, I think we'll finish chapter 10, second half of chapter 10, this momentous hour of need. So I don't know if anyone...
I can't find where we're at. So
okay, no problem. We're about halfway through, and the sentence begins. Are you reading it on Vedabase website, or? So I think on Vedabase it breaks it up with a thick grey line. There's these little breaks in the text, so we should be at a thick grey line, and it starts with at Chippiwada, Bhaktivedanta. You got it. Great, wonderful. So if anyone wants to read, yeah, take it away. Or one of us is happy to do it. We don't mind. Okay, we can start. We can give it a go. Okay, do you want to start?
Yeah, I just put my glasses on. At Chippiwada, Bhaktivedanta Swami followed much the same daily schedule as at Keshigat, except that with Krishna Pandit doing some of the secretarial work for Back to Godhead, he was free to devote more hours to Srimad Bhagavatam. Krishna Pandit. He used to translate Srimad Bhagavatam before dawn, about 3 a.m. In the beginning there was no typewriter, but then he arranged a portable typewriter. He would do his daily work and then cook his food himself. I arranged raw materials for his cooking. Sometimes he used to come to my family asking my wife to get some food. Sometimes he would also bathe at 5 or 6 in the afternoon. Every day he was typing, and he himself was reading some Bhagavatam. And he was going down in the temple for darshan. Then he was going outside, sometimes returning at 2 or 4 in the afternoon. Then he was typing and sending the proofs of Back to Godhead to a place and checking them. He was doing by hand all this type of work. His main activity was typing many hours a day. Bhaktivedanta Swami worked from a Sanskrit and Bengali Bhagavatam, edited by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and a large book containing the original commentaries of 12 great acharyas. He had a standard format, he made a Roman transliteration of the Sanskrit Devanagari script, then word-for-word English synonyms, an English prose translation, and finally his English purport on that verse. Before writing his own purport, however, he would consult the commentaries of the Acharyas, especially Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, Vishwanath Chakravarti, Jiva Goswami, Vijayadvaj Tirtha, and Sridhar Swami. He contemplated the size of the project he was attempting. The Bhagavatam contained 18,000 verses. The first canto's 17 chapters would fill 3 volumes or 400 pages each, and the second canto with 10 chapters would take 2 volumes. Up through the 9th canto, there would be maybe 30 volumes. The 10th canto, containing 90 chapters, would take 20 volumes. There were 12 cantos, and so the total would be at least 60 volumes. He thought he might be able to finish it in 5 to 7 years. If the Lord keeps me physically fit, then in the fulfillment of Srila Prabhupada's will, I could complete this work. He decided to introduce the first volume with a biographical sketch of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the ideal preacher of the Bhagavatam. The reader could best appreciate the Bhagavatam by seeing his practical demonstration in the life of Lord Chaitanya. The special feature of Lord Chaitanya's presentation had been his desire that Srimad Bhagavatam be preached in every nook and corner of the world by everyone who happens to take his birth in India. Lord Chaitanya had called Srimad Bhagavatam the spotless Purana and had considered the chanting and hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam along with the Hare Krishna mantra to be a complete scientific process for developing pure love of God.
Working from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's commentary on Chaitanya Charitamrita and Chaitanya Bhagavat, Bhaktivedanta Swami gave a 50-page synopsis of Lord Chaitanya's life and his Sankirtan movement. He described Lord Chaitanya's divine ecstasies, his philosophical confrontations with leading scholars of the day, and his inauguration of the Sankirtan movement, the congregational chanting of the holy name. Bhaktivedanta Swami especially connected Lord Chaitanya's life and teachings to what he saw as the present crucial time in history. Help for humanity in this momentous hour of need lay in the Vedic literature and especially in Srimad Bhagavatam. We know that the foreign invaders of India could break down some of the monumental architectural work in India, but they were unable to break up the perfect ideals of human civilization so far kept hidden within the Sanskrit language of Vedic wisdom. The Sanskrit language had protected the secret for thousands of centuries, but now the secret had to be released to the world. As he approached the first verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhaktivedanta Swami became absorbed in the Bhagavatam's purpose. The verses stressed that the Bhagavatam alone could save society from the evil influences of the age of Kali. Srimad Bhagavatam's recommendation for this age was simply to hear from the pure devotees about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. The setting of the Bhagavatam was a gathering of sages at Naimisharanya about 5,000 years ago, at the dawn of the present age of Kali. Foreseeing the degradation of humanity, the sages asked the senior member of the assembly, Suta Goswami, now that Lord Krishna, the shelter of all religious principles, has returned to his spiritual abode, where are religious principles to be found? Suta's answer was that the epic Srimad Bhagavatam, which is as brilliant as the sun, was a literary incarnation of God and would give direction to persons lost in the dense darkness of Kali Yuga. In the beginning of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Vyasadeva, under the instruction of his spiritual master Narada Muni, sat down and entered a deep meditation. In trance, he saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his energies, and the suffering souls of Kali Yuga. He also saw that the remedy for their suffering was pure devotional service. With this vision and the instructions of his spiritual master as his inspiration, Vyasadeva set about to compile Srimad Bhagavatam to give the highest benefit to the suffering souls of Kali Yuga. In presenting the literary incarnation of God, Srimad Bhagavatam, for the benefit of the Western world, Bhaktivedanta Swami realized that he was performing an important task, following in the footsteps of Srila Vyasadeva. As Srila Vyasadeva had had a vision of Krishna and had received direction from his spiritual master before beginning his literary mission, Bhaktivedanta Swami had his vision and had received instruction from his spiritual master. Bhaktivedanta Swami envisaged distributing in mass the book of Srila Vyasadeva. He would not merely translate it, he would personally take it to the West, present it, and teach people in the West, through the book and in person, how to develop pure love of God. Srila Prabhupada. The Communist Party has become popular simply by distributing their literatures. In Calcutta, the communist agents were inviting friends and reading their literature. The Russians never came to India, but by distributing literature in every language, they got a pretty good number of followers. If it is possible for ordinary third-class, mundane literature, why shouldn't transcendental literature create devotees all over the world? There is good potency for pushing on these literatures very vigorously from village to village. The Bhagavat Dharma is the original religion of the human society. Whatever else may be passing as religion has come from the Vedic literature. People are after these books. They are hankering for them. Lord Chaitanya said that in every town and village on the surface of the world, they will know the message of the Sankirtan movement. This means that in every village and town all over the world, there are many candidates who are awaiting this message. It is transcendental literature. Nobody can challenge it. It is done so nicely without any spot, the spotless Purana. Bhaktivedanta Swami put his faith in Srimad Bhagavatam, giving up almost all other kinds of missionary activity. And this had been the advice and example of his spiritual master and of Lord Chaitanya. They had not been interested in building costly temples or in creating many neophyte disciples. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had stressed preaching. Preaching meant books, and the best book was Srimad Bhagavatam. To write and publish the Bhagavatam for the enlightenment of the general populace was real service to the Lord. That was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's opinion. He had preferred publishing books to establishing temples, and he had specifically told his disciples to write books. It was the business of advanced, empowered devotees to write books, publish them, and distribute them widely. A program to distribute transcendental literature everywhere, with even more expertise than the communists, would create a great positive effect on the people of Europe and America. And if Europeans and Americans turned to Krishna consciousness, then the rest of the world would follow. Bhaktivedanta Swami continued working alone in his room at Chippiwada, absorbed in thoughts of spreading the news of Krishna on a scale never before attempted.
Yeah, Haribol, shall I go next? Yeah. He sometimes wondered how Westerners, who were so far removed from Vedic culture, could adopt it. They were meat eaters, milechas. When one of his godbrothers had gone to England, the Marquis of Zetland, on hearing the 4 prohibitions against sinful life, had laughed scornfully. Impossible. But Srimad Bhagavatam spoke for itself. Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is also the Paramatma in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, does cleanse the desire for material enjoyment in the heart of the devotee, who has developed the urge for hearing his, Krishna's, messages, which are themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. Although he was known as an English preacher, Bhaktivedanta Swami knew there were always faults in his presentation in that foreign language, and there was no editor to correct them. But such technical faults would not keep him from printing Srimad Bhagavatam. This idea was also presented in the opening chapters of the Bhagavatam. The literature, which is full with description of transcendental glories, of the name, fame, forms, pastimes, etc., of the unlimited Supreme Lord is a different creation of transcendental vocabulary, all meant for bringing about a revolution in the impious life of a misdirected civilization of the world. Such transcendental literatures, even though irregularly composed, is heard, sung, and accepted by the purified men who are thoroughly honest. Bhaktivedanta Swami wrote in his purport, "We know that in our honest attempt for presenting this great literature, conveying transcendental message for reviving the God consciousness of the people in general, as a matter of re-spiritualization of the world atmosphere, is fraught with many difficulties. Our capacity of presenting the matter in adequate language, especially a foreign language, will certainly fail, and there may be so many literary discrepancies, in spite of our honest attempt to present it in the proper way. But we are sure that with all our faults in this connection, the seriousness of the subject matter will be taken into consideration, and the leaders of the society will still accept this on account of its being an honest attempt for glorifying the Almighty Great, so much now badly needed. When there is fire in the house, the inmates of the house go out for help from the neighbours, who may be foreigners to such inmates, and yet without any adequate language, the victims of the fire express themselves, and the neighbours understand the need, even though not expressed in adequate language. The same spirit of cooperation is needed in the matter of broadcasting this transcendental message of the Srimad Bhagavatam throughout the whole polluted atmosphere of the present day world situation. After all, it is a technical science of spiritual values, and as such we are concerned with the techniques, not with the language. If the techniques of this great literature are understood by the people of the world, there is the success. Certainly, Kali Yuga was such an emergency. The house was on fire. Honest men who could understand the need would welcome Srimad Bhagavatam, even though it was now being presented with so many faulty and broken linguistic technicalities. Bhaktivedanta Swami was presenting Srimad Bhagavatam unchanged, with the greatest respect for Srila Vyasadeva, and that was his cardinal virtue. He was adding his own realizations, but not in a spirit of trying to surpass the previous spiritual masters. In the all-important matter of presenting the subject strictly in parampara, Bhaktivedanta Swami suffered from no faulty or broken technicalities. He knew that without the parampara, the Bhagavatam purports would have no value. Day and night, he typed at his desk beneath a small adjustable light that dangled from the ceiling on its cord. He sat on a thin mat, his back to the large pyramid that stood oddly upright within the bare room. Pages accumulated, and he kept them in place with stones. Food and sleep, although necessary, were only incidental. He was completely convinced that his Srimad Bhagavatam would create a revolution in a misdirected civilization. Thus he translated each word and gave each purport with exacting care and concentration. But it had to be done as quickly as possible. Stop there. Broken line.
I can continue if you like. In February of 1961, on Vyasa Puja Day, the anniversary of the appearance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, Bhaktivedanta Swami was again in Vrindavan. In honor of their spiritual master, some of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's disciples had gathered, offered flowers before his picture, and held congregational chanting in the temple. But Bhaktivedanta Swami thought that they should be doing much more than that. They should be planning and executing the worldwide preaching mission that Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati had desired. Instead, they were a gathering of independent individuals, each with his own small idea, each maintaining a small center or living at a center, but with no world programs, not even a program for India. Most of them had no plans or vision beyond their own bodily maintenance. Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati had asked for a governing body to conduct his movement, but there was no governing body, and practically there was no movement. Some who had fought bitterly were again on speaking terms and feared that any sudden organizational attempts now might simply stir up old animosities. At least they could gather together and make an offering to their spiritual master. Amongst his god brothers, Bhaktivedanta Swami was a junior sannyas. Although a recognized writer and editor, he had no temple or followers. Yet he knew he was trying to follow Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati. He saw himself helpless and alone against the vast forces of Maya. His god brothers were not an army united against Maya's forces, but were more like apathetic monks, growing old, holding on to religious principles and rituals, devoid of life. How could they gather to worship their spiritual master without distressfully admitting their failure and, in the spirit of better late than never, trying to rectify it? Since the custom on Vyasa Puja Day was for each disciple to write an offering, glorifying his spiritual master, and to share it within the assembly of god brothers, Bhaktivedanta Swami wrote an offering, more like an explosion than a eulogy, and humbly placed it before his god brothers for their response. Even now, my god brothers, you return here on the order of our master, and together we engage in this puja. But simply a festival of flowers and fruits does not constitute worship. The one who serves the message of the Guru really worships him. Oh shame, my dear brothers, aren't you embarrassed? In the manner of businessmen, you increase your disciples. Our master said to preach, let the neophytes remain inside the temples and simply ring the bells. But just take a good look at the terrible situation that has arisen. Everyone has become a sense enjoyer and has given up preaching. From the seas across the earth, penetrate the universal shell, come together and preach this Krishna consciousness. Then our master's service will be in proper order. Make your promise today, give up all your politics and diplomacy. If the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati could join and preach together, there was every chance that they could create a spiritual revolution within the sinful world. That had been the hope of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati, and Bhaktivedanta Swami expressed that hope in his Vyasa Puja offering. When will that day come when a temple will be established in every house in every corner of the world? When will the High Court judge be a Gaudiya Vaishnav with tilak beautifully decorating his forehead? When will a Vaishnav winning votes be elected president of the land and preaching be spread everywhere? Does anyone want to continue?
Yeah, we'll carry on. As he read the poem, its truth exploding in the midst of the gathering of aging sannyasis, some approved and some were incensed. Their meeting, however, took no direction. They did not sit down together and plan as he had pleaded. Swami Maharaj's poem was taken as another poetic expression or as an opinion. The godbrothers were inclined to let the old wounds heal with the passing of time, to go back over the whole thing again and reconstruct the mission as it had been before when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati had been present, and to attempt all those ambitious programs. How was it possible? They were getting old. Some did not want to leave their shelter of Vrindavan. They would worship Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati within only the holy Dham. If Bhaktivedanta Swami could do something more, let him go ahead and try. Bhaktivedanta Swami returned to Keshi Ghat thoughtful. For many years he had been unable to take a leading part in the mission because of family commitments. In 1935 in Bombay, his godbrothers had even asked him to be president of the Mutt there, but Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati had said it was not necessary that Abhay Charan join them. He would come in his own way. Now, by the grace of his spiritual master, he was ready to fulfill the meaning of sannyas. The Krishna conscious world he had described in his poem was not a utopia, presented merely to incite his godbrothers dreamers talk of the impossible. It was possible. But in any case, he had to write and print Krishna-conscious books and preach abroad. It was what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati wanted. If his godbrothers would not do it jointly, then he would do it. In January of 1961, one of Bhaktivedanta Swami's Delhi acquaintances had shown him an announcement for the Congress for Cultivating Human Spirit, a convention to be held in Tokyo, May 10th to 20th. The theme was World Peace through Cultivating Human Spirit. International participants were invited. As soon as Bhaktivedanta Swami had seen it, he wanted to go. Although his main interest had always been in the US, if Japan presented itself first, why not? And their invitation was in English. If they accepted his reservation, they would pay for his board and lodging at the convention hotel, although he would have to pay his own travel expenses. Bhaktivedanta Swami wrote to the sponsors in the International Foundation for Cultural Harmony and proposed a speech, "How should one cultivate human spirit?" The Secretary General of the foundation, Mr. Toshihiro Nakano, wrote back to him at Keishigat, expressing his high regard for the Indian spiritual culture and for his proposed presentation. Mr. Nakano also enclosed an official certificate, as he had requested, stating that Bhaktivedanta Swami was a bona fide visitor to their convention, whose expenses in Japan would be paid. They requested, to whom may it be concern, that his passport and visa be granted in time for the May 10th arrival in Japan. Bhaktivedanta Swami then conceived a special project for the convention. The 10th canto, 20th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam presents a description of autumn in Vrindavan, and for each seasonal phenomenon, the Bhagavatam presents a parallel teaching from the Vedas. For example, it compares the dark, cloudy evening of the reigning autumn season to the present age of Kali, when the bright stars of Vedic wisdom, saints and scriptures, are temporarily obscured by a godless civilization. The chapter contains dozens of such examples, and Bhaktivedanta Swami proposed 50 commentaries to accompany 50 illustrations to be displayed at the convention. He began preparing the commentaries, which he entitled The Light of the Bhagavat. He wrote directions from which an artist could design a painting to go with each lesson from the picture. 50 pictures and commentaries, Bhaktivedanta Swami felt would make an impressive display for visitors at the convention. The convention organizers liked the idea.
As for your proposal to get pictures drawing by artists, according to your suggestion, the Institution Department of the Congress will immediately take people disposal for it under the full consideration of about some specimen idea of picture, which will be given to us by you, so I should like to get them as soon as possible. Bhaktivedanta Swami worked quickly to produce a 20,000-word manuscript, 50 lessons for 50 illustrations. The pictures were to depict the forests, fields, and skies of Vrindavan during the rainy season, and the lessons were sometimes criticisms of godless governments, materialists, and false religionists, sometimes assertions of moral principles and God consciousness, and sometimes depictions of Lord Krishna and his eternal associates in Vrindavan. Everything went smoothly between Bhaktivedanta Swami and the sponsors in Japan. The problem was to raise the travel fare. He approached the likely sources, writing to the central government's Ministry for Scientific Research and Cultural Affairs. He presented his certificate from Mr. Nakano and explained his position as a sannyasi. In late March, the ministry sent him a form to complete and return. Time was getting short. On March 29th, he wrote to the Vice President, Dr. Radhakrishnan, with whom he had a speaking acquaintance, as well as a philosophical difference. You know that I am a sannyasi without any relation with the bank. Neither I am attached with the financing institution, but the Japanese organizers have liked my literatures and they want me to be present there. He pleaded that since the great acharyas of India had formally presented their knowledge for the benefit of the world, the Indian government today should send representatives of the acharyas to deliver the message of Atma, or the human spirit. He also wrote to the deputy manager of Scindia Steam Navigation Company in Bombay, reminding him of his 1958 offer to give a 50% concession on a ticket to the United States. After explaining his invitation from Mr. Nakano in Japan, Bhaktivedanta Swami pointed out that the full round-trip fare to Japan would be less than half the fare to the United States. Trying all possibilities at once, and with less than a month and a half before the convention, he wrote to another potential donor, Mr. Brijratran S. Mahatta, who had once expressed his willingness to send Bhaktivedanta Swami to South America when an Indian sponsor there had written expressing interest. At that time, Bhaktivedanta Swami had been unable to get the proper certification from the Indian government. But here, he explained, was a new opportunity to present the message of the Vedic literature to an international gathering of interested people. And passage to Japan was less than South America. On the same day he wrote to Mr. Mahatta, he also mailed his completed form to the Ministry for Scientific Research. In answer to their question as to why he was asking for a donation and whether he had done so before, he replied, "Before this, I never asked the ministry for any financial assistance, as there is no need for it. As sannyasi, I can ask for financial help when there is absolute necessity. Our life is dedicated to render service to the humanity at large for reviving the dormant spiritual consciousness." Meanwhile, his other arrangements proceeded with full cooperation from Japan. He had already sent Mr. Nakano the first 20 illustrative ideas from the light of Bhagavat. "Japan is famous for artistic work," he wrote, "and India is famous for spiritual culture. We should now combine." He suggested they also print the text and pictures as a book. Mr. Nakano assured Bhaktivedanta Swami that they would be eager to meet him at Haneda Airport. They would be readily recognizable since they would be holding a flag. And if he liked, he could stay in Japan for an entire month and hold local meetings after the scheduled convention. Mr. Nakano had also asked a favor of Bhaktivedanta Swami. To solidify relations with the mayors of 3 Japanese cities, he asked that Bhaktivedanta Swami send letters to the mayors requesting their full support of the Human Spirit Congress. Bhaktivedanta Swami immediately complied. By now it was April, and no money had come. Finally, after a personal interview in which he received a definite no from Dr. Radhakrishnan, Bhaktivedanta Swami turned to Dr. Nakano in disappointment. On April the 18th he wrote, "I am in due receipt of your letter of the 9th instant, and I am grateful to you for all that you have said for me. I am a humble creature, and I am just trying to do my bit in this connection because I was so ordered by my spiritual master, Sri Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj. Well, I am feeling too much ecstasy for the reception arrangement you are doing for me. I beg to inform you that my passage expenses, which is near about 3,500 rupees, is not yet settled. I submitted one application to the Government of India for help, and a copy of my application is also sent herewith. I also wrote a private letter to Dr. S. Radhakrishnan in this connection, and the reply which I have received is also enclosed herewith. All these are not very encouraging for me. I therefore saw the Vice President today personally, but he says the same thing as he has written in his letter. Although the matter is not yet hopeless altogether, I am disturbed in my mind, thinking, what shall I do in case the government denies to help? I am therefore seeking your good advice in this connection. Dr. S. Radhakrishnan said to me that you had also invited him to attend your congress, and he opines that the passage expenses might have been paid by you. The hope and expectation of the congress is undoubtedly very great, and I wish that I may fully utilize this opportunity for general welfare of the entire human society. I have fully explained my views authoritatively in my statements already sent to you for publication, and the gist idea is expressed in the letter of the mayors, a copy of which is also enclosed. As a sannyasi, I have no personal purse for expenditure. Under the circumstances, if the government denies to help for the passage, then I will have to ask for the same from you. Otherwise, my going to the Congress will end in dream only. I have very little faith in the dealings of the politicians, and especially of the Indian politicians.
From the conversation of Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, it appeared to me that the government does not approve of such congress as are organized by private persons, and as such they do not participate in such congress. I shall wait for the final decision for 1 week more, when the matter will be clear, yes or no. Replies from prospective donors in India were all negative. On April 20th, he cabled Mr. Nakano. As you have developed a deep love for me, I dare to ask you to send me financial help to take me to Japan. I think you can immediately instruct your embassy in Delhi to do the needful and dispatch me to Japan on your behalf. I am feeling too much to meet you and the Congress so that we can build up a solid institute for spiritual cultivation. I shall await your instruction by cable to fix up my program. But Mr. Nakano could not help, and Bhaktivedanta Swami's effort ended in a dream only. In July 1962, Bhaktivedanta Swami changed his Vrindavan residence from Vamsi Gopalaji Temple to Radha Damodar Temple. For 3 years he had been paying the rent of 5 rupees per month for his Radha Damodar rooms and paying for the extensive repairs. Now the main room had electric lighting and a fan, and the walls had been plastered and painted. The room was 7 feet by 15 feet, with smooth plaster walls and a floor of sandstone squares of uneven sizes, the same as the stone tiles cemented in front of the samadhi of Rupa Goswami. The room was furnished with a small, low desk, a cushion mat, and a wooden cot with a rope woven surface to lie on. The view was not the panorama he had enjoyed at Keshigat, and the neighborhood was not so secluded. But now, without even moving from his room, he could look into the temple and see a portion of the altar and the 4-foot-high form of Vrindavan Chandra, the black marble Krishna deity Krishna Das Kaviraj had worshipped hundreds of years ago. The main room was connected to the kitchen by a 10-foot-long veranda, which faced the courtyard, and from his kitchen he could see the samadhi of Rupa Goswami. So the place was superior to his room at the Vamsi Gopalaji temple, because now he was living in the temple of Jiva Goswami, where great souls like the Goswamis Rupa, Sanatan, Raghunath, and Jiva had all gathered, taken prasadam, chanted, and discussed Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. It was the best place to work on Srimad Bhagavatam. At 1 a.m., when no one else was up and it was very quiet, Bhaktivedanta Swami would wake and begin writing. Since electric failures were not uncommon in Vrindavan, he would often work by lantern light, but in any case a beam of light would shine out from his room onto the veranda, while inside the room he worked under its brightness. While he wrote in stillness, sometimes a toad, as dry as the stone floor, would hop out of hiding and across the floor, exiting through the cement lattice work of the opposite wall. Sometimes a tiny mouse would run out from behind a window shutter and hide in another place. Otherwise, the room was complete sanctified stillness, and the inspiration of being in the presence of the 6 Goswamis was strong. Above the open courtyard, the sky would be full of clearly visible stars. As he worked, the only sounds would come from the town, perhaps of a dog barking in the distance. At 4 a.m., The temple pujari, who slept under a shelter near the deity doors, would awake, turn on an electric light, and with a long pole clear the bats from the rafters. At 5 a.m., after waking the deities, the pujari would open the doors before the altar and begin Mangalarti. He would offer a flame while a few resident devotees gathered and chanted, playing instruments. Usually someone would bang a gong, while someone else rang a large bell. Any sounds from the courtyard carried immediately to Bhaktivedanta Swami's quarters, and the clanging bell and gong would suddenly reverberate against the walls of his small room. From his sitting place, he could see only Vrindavan Chandra on the left of the altar. Sometimes he would pause at his work and walk into the courtyard to see the deities and their arti. The altar was filled with deities of Radha and Krishna, who had been worshipped by Jiva Goswami and other Vaishnavacharyas hundreds of years ago. After 10 minutes, the pujari, having offered the flame and then a conch shell filled with water, would turn and sprinkle offered water on the heads of the devotees, and the ceremony would end. After working a few hours on Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhaktivedanta Swami would sit in his room and chant japa. As the morning sky turned light blue, the stars would vanish, and the residents of Vrindavan would arrive to visit the deities and the samadhis of the Goswamis. Old women would enter the temple calling out, Jai Radhe, in broken voices. When Bhaktivedanta Swami opened the shutters, his room would fill with light. His windows faced a courtyard, but they were not so much windows as cement lattice work in the wall. Although passers-by could not easily see into the room, the lattice work allowed light to enter. In the morning light, the room was clearly revealed, the arched ceiling, the freshly painted walls with arched niches, the floor of inlaid stone. Bhaktivedanta Swami's thin sannyas danda, wrapped in heavy saffron khadi, leaned against one corner of the room. On one shelf he had placed a picture of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, on another a stack of books and manuscripts. The room's 2 doors appeared flimsy even when locked, and the whole room tilted slightly to the left. It was bare but peaceful. Often sitting on the veranda between the 2 rooms, he would view the courtyard, the altar, and the deities. Radha Damodar, Vrindavan Chandra, and several other Radha Krishna deities awaited their visitors. During the morning, the deity doors remained open as a regular file of visitors turned the temple into a bustling place of pilgrimage. No one stayed very long. Some had rigid schedules to visit many temples and hurried on. Poor people and also local businessmen, their wives in colorful saris, all devotees, headed towards the altar, calling Jai Ho, Jai Radhe. After greeting the deities, they would disappear through the door to the outdoor area of the temple compound to visit the samadhis.
Although in Vrindavan there were hundreds of small temple-like tombs honouring past Vaishnavacharyas, Bhaktivedanta Swami regularly visited the chief samadhis, those of Sri Jiva Goswami, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, and Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Within a separate area of the temple compound were the Bhajan Kutir and the samadhi of Rupa Goswami. Bhaktivedanta Swami often sat chanting japa before Rupa Goswami's samadhi. The line of pilgrims in the temple would continue, entering the outdoor area of the compound, coming to offer dandavats to Rupa Goswami. Most pilgrims considered this the most important feature of their visit to Radha Damodar temple, and even if they offered respect nowhere else, they would stop before the samadhi of Rupa Goswami. They would stop with folded hands and bow, chanting Jaya Radhe, or with their hands in their bead bags, chant the Hare Krishna mantra, circumambulating the samadhi. Bhaktivedanta Swami would sit and chant even after the early morning rush of visitors, or sometimes he would walk to the nearby temples of Radha Shyama Sundar or Radha Madan Mohan, always returning by 11 to cook his meal. As he cooked, and later as he sat to take his prasadam, he could see through the lattice work the samadhi of Rupa Goswami. Feeling Rupa Goswami's presence, he would think of his own mission for his spiritual master. The devotees of Lord Chaitanya are known as Rupanugas, followers of Rupa Goswami. Without following the teachings and example of Rupa Goswami, one cannot enter the path of pure devotion to Radha and Krishna. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was especially known as a strict Rupanuga, as described in the Sanskrit prayers written in his honor. I offer my respectful obeisances unto Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, the personified energy of Sri Chaitanya's mercy, who delivers devotional service enriched with conjugal love of Radha and Krishna, current exactly in the line of revelation of Srila Rupa Goswami. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, who are the personified teachings of Lord Chaitanya. You are the deliverer of the fallen souls. You do not tolerate any statement that is against the teachings of devotional service enunciated by Srila Rupa Goswami. Bhaktivedanta Swami's spiritual master and the previous spiritual masters in the disciplic succession had wanted the Krishna consciousness movement to spread all over the world. And as Bhaktivedanta Swami daily gathered inspiration, sitting before Rupa Goswami's samadhi, he prayed to his spiritual predecessors for guidance. The intimate direction he received from them was an elaborate dictation, and no government, no publisher, nor anyone else could shake or diminish it. Rupa Goswami wanted him to go to the West. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati wanted him to go to the West. Krishna had arranged that he be brought to Radha Damodar temple to receive their blessing. At the Radha Damodar temple, he felt he had entered an eternal residence known only to pure devotees of the Lord. Yet although they were allowing him to associate intimately with them in the place of their pastimes, they were ordering him to leave Radha Damodar and Vrindavan, and to deliver the message of the acharyas to forgetful parts of the world. In June, the weather became intolerably hot, and one could not remain active through the afternoon. During the most oppressive hours, Bhaktivedanta Swami would shut his doors and shutters and run the overhead fan. By evening, the heat would abate. Again, a flurry of visitors would arrive, and in the temple compound there would be evening kirtans. Sitting on his veranda, Bhaktivedanta Swami would sometimes talk with visitors, or sometimes they would come to his door and observe him as he worked at his typewriter. He was known in Vrindavan as a scholar and a sublime devotee, but he kept to himself as much as possible, especially in the summer of 1962, working on Srimad Bhagavatam. That was his real purpose in coming here, to prepare the books he could distribute to the people of the West. Although as yet he had no means for traveling even as far as Japan, and no means for printing books, these were the goals for which he worked. He had not come to Vrindavan to die and return to Godhead. Rather, he had come because it was the ideal place to gain spiritual strength for his main life's work. The exact shape of his future mission, Bhaktivedanta Swami did not know, but he did know that he must prepare himself for preaching Srimad Bhagavatam to the English-speaking Western world. He must become a perfectly equipped instrument of his masters, and if they desired, they would send him. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So yeah, that's the end of chapter 10. Chapter 11 has a tantalizing title, but we won't get into that now.
Something to look forward to.
Yeah, always something to look forward to with Prabhupada. I don't know if anyone has any comments or reflections. Just one thing quickly to start off. When it said he remembered that someone in 1958 had given him an offer of half price, I just flicked back and checked, and he remembered that in 1961. So it's 3 years he remembered that.
Wow.
Very determined, though. Like really, it seemed like he really fixed. Someone offered him a half price plane fare. 3 years later, he turns up and says, "I want it." Yeah? Like that. He told me I could have it, and I want it. Quite amazing. I can't remember what I was doing last week. Very fixed on his service. Yeah, I thought that was quite amazing. Anyway, I don't know if anybody else has anything to share. But
was just gonna say that I hadn't heard before about the whole pastime about him maybe going to Japan. That was amazing. So far out. Yeah, I just wanted to express no idea.
Have you seen the book Light of the Bhagavat? I don't know if
Yeah, I've seen that one. I've read that one. Yeah.
yeah.
Just show it because I don't know, maybe Lucy, if you've seen it, it's probably backwards,
I'll be back.
but it has the illustrations are like
Japanese
Japanese
Oriental style.
style paintings, like
But they're of Krishna and
but they're all
Vrindavan.
of Krishna's Vrindavan and Krishna's pastimes, and they're like, you don't see this style in usually in Prabhupada's books. So yeah, see if I can find one.
It's quite like a broad, in a way, I suppose it's quite representative of Prabhupada's mood. You know, that it's not an Indian thing.
Yeah, it's for the world.
Yeah, it's for the whole world. So there's no reason why they can't. You know, they all look giant or Japanese, don't they?
Yeah.
They're like all the sadhus and the sages.
Even their dress.
They're dressed like traditional. I actually don't know if these paintings are the ones
These
that.
are different. I haven't seen these ones before.
I don't think they're the ones that he commissioned originally.
No,
Someone
not the
did
original
it.
ones.
Later on, it was they got someone else to do it.
And here's small. You can see Krishna in this one.
Oh, nice. Nice. Very powerful book. Amazing. He did 20,000 words in like no time. It's so committed.
Yeah.
Like before he'd even got on the plane ticket or anything, he wrote 20,000 words.
It's amazing.
It's a special level of commitment and determination to do the spiritual master's service. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if anybody else has anything they wanted to share.
I always like hearing about when Prabhupada's at the Radha Damodar temple, because was it 2 years ago?
Yeah. When we went.
We went there, and just being we went to Prabhupada's room at the Radha Damodar temple, and just being in that room and knowing that, you know, having heard this, when you're in that room and you can just, there's just this energy. I can't describe, I've never felt anything like it. And just knowing that's where Prabhupada sort of built up strength and was preparing to come to the West. It's really powerful. So reading it and hearing the description, I felt like I was transported back there. Really nice.
Amazing that you did.
There was a little petal
from his garland
on the floor, so I carry that with me always.
When you walk into his room, there's like his bed is still there and his little desk is there, and there's a murti of Prabhupada behind the desk, and he's sitting writing like that. So when you go in, it's like they've kept it as it was.
The kitchen is still there.
His kitchen is preserved.
So yeah, it's all preserved how it was.
And so every day, it's not an ISKCON temple, but every day whoever's in charge, I don't know if it's ISKCON devotees that go in or the devotees at the Radha Damodar temple, but devotees go in and put a fresh garland on Prabhupada, and they light incense, offer incense and like that, and they take care of the room. I think it's the devotees at the temple. I don't know anyway, I'm not sure. But so we got some of the flower petals from Prabhupada's garland at Radha Damodar temple.
We've got a nice message from Radha Priya in the chat. She said, "What's also amazing to me is that I am reaching the age when Srila Prabhupada was just beginning his Western mission, and I feel as if I am getting old. And yes, the feeling at Radha Damodar in his room is just profound and wonderful." It's really special.
Yeah, it's a very special place. Similar when in Mayapur, you can go to the place where Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and the Gaur Kishore Das Babaji, they would discuss the Sankirtan movement and how it would spread across the whole world.
Circumambulate that room.
There's one room in Mayapur in Navadvip where you can go and it's like there you can see that room where those three personalities used to sit and talk. It's like
it's so special because when you're there, you're like, wow, because they sat and they actually did the yagya. And you think, wow, we have it so easy. In one sense, we have it so easy. Like even just when we were reading, hearing, the all the way up until this point, Prabhupada's had so many struggles. He's just hit wall after, like in one sense, he's just hit wall after wall. Everything's been seemingly like a dead end. But he's so determined, and it's like, I don't know. It makes me feel very hopeful. It's really hope giving.
Yeah, think about what Mahaprabhu said as well about feeling old. Like, he's on his basically everybody else in Vrindavan won't leave there at that age. They take a vow never to leave, but they die and go back to Godhead. Mahaprabhu's just like not having it. He's like,
not
quite
thinking about himself ever.
He's quite amazing. And to think that he could drop, he could drop dead at any minute as far as he's concerned. He doesn't know, but he's still just still doing it. Amazing. Like he just, really phenomenal.
One question, if that's okay, came to mind. You were just mentioning about Prabhupada's constant difficulties, and one thing I was wondering what you thought is, when we have difficulties, I think sometimes it can feel like, oh, Krishna doesn't want us to do this, or that it's not the arrangement. But how can you distinguish between that and like, oh, mine's just like what Prabhupada was experiencing? It's just like a challenge in order to, you just need to be determined and carry on. How do you know when to stop and when to carry on?
Well, I think the first thing that springs to mind, because somebody asked this in our Bhakti Shastri class, basically. We just talked about it in the other room before we came here. And the answer from Mother Urmila, one of Prabhupada's disciples, was that if something comes to you easily, then she was talking about a specific set of circumstances. It wasn't a general thing. But she was saying if something comes to you easily, then you usually know that Krishna wants, it's like that's an indication. And I wasn't there in the class. I was just hearing it paraphrased. So I can't sort of critique her answer. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I'm just saying we were trying to discuss it. And my understanding, and I think Radha Priya will, and also Maha Mantra and Lucy may have other things to say, but my understanding is Prabhupada has it on, he's working under authority. So he's been given the instruction by his spiritual master that you go and preach. So everything that is not conducive to that will fall, because it's in opposition to the will of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And if it's in opposition to his desire, then Krishna will sort of swat it away, It's like that. That's how I understand it. So when we practice devotional service, it should be under an authority. And so if your authority gives you an instruction, and they're a bona fide authority like that, so then and that's where you become sort of empowered, and you become determined, because it gives you that. If you have that faith, that deep faith, then your understanding of your circumstances changes. But if we're acting on our own whim, and we've sort of, like that, then it's different. But if your guru has told you, and if you're not initiated, it may just be you want to go and distribute books. Well, you have Prabhupada wants everyone to go and distribute books, so you're working under his authority, and in that sense. So he just knew all he wants. There's a famous purport by Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, I think, and it's the purport to Bhagavad Gita 241, which I think Prabhupada was a really big inspiration to him when he was sort of planning and the movement and everything. And it's talking about intelligence that is fixed and intelligence that is, I don't know what they called it now, many branched. I think Krishna uses that word. Yeah, many, like one that's splayed out or one that is fixed. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that intelligence is fixed when it is focused on carrying out the order of one spiritual master. And then he goes into his whole thing. I had a really powerful recording of Tamal Krishna Maharaj reading it. And it's like fire, it's so powerful. Like it really just strikes you in the heart when you hear it. I've lost the recording now. But he says that I may live or I may die, or he says the entire material creation may be completely annihilated. I do not care. I just want to carry out the order of my spiritual master. So he doesn't even care if his family, his body, or the whole planet or the universe is just destroyed. He just wants to carry out the order of his guru. And so he'll do that no matter what happens to the material, he's not bothered about it. So it's very powerful. So Prabhupada was fixed like that he knows my guru's given me that instruction. Anything that tries to deviate me from that instruction is Maya. And the instruction is transcendental. That's how I understand it. Or you could say anything that tries to, because obviously Maya is one of Krishna's energies, so anything that tries to deviate me from that is actually Krishna's mercy, and is, and then deepening my surrender, like that. Yeah. Oh, Radha Priya has yeah.
She said, because Srila Prabhupada was acting directly under his spiritual master's instruction, every obstacle was an opportunity for more service and faith. This is my understanding. Yeah, I was thinking in line with both of those points, that we were with our gurus a couple of months ago now, and one of the girls there was having quite a difficult time. She's coming up against a lot of obstacles in her life right now, and she's kind of confused about what she's supposed to be doing, and she's just, we all go through it, I think, multiple times in our life,
multiple times a day.
It's not always clear, what am I supposed to be doing, or and it all can feel, everything can feel topsy-turvy and all jumbled up. And I know our guru was saying that it's an adventure in surrender. We can see our life in Krishna consciousness. It's an adventure in surrender. And if you have that goal and you know what your goal is, you can only take one step at a time. So you just, wherever you're at, what's my next step? And it doesn't matter if you come up against an obstacle or it doesn't go how you thought it should go, or you can just, like Radha Priya says, it's an opportunity for more service and to deepen your faith. And yeah, it's an adventure in surrender.
I think I'd ask, because we read, it was the day where it was the anniversary of Prabhupada taking sannyas. Yeah. And so we read some of the Lilamrta that day. Yeah. And I was asking, I sort of knew philosophically, I knew I could recite the answer, but for some reason I still asked the question. I was saying that it seems like Prabhupada, there's a lot of him not knowing. Yeah. But he's like a pure devotee. But and I don't mean this, I really don't mean this in like a sort of derogatory way, but I was just sort of trying to explain, there seems to be a lot of instances where he doesn't know what's going on. And I was like, but then he's a pure devotee and he's in touch with the super soul, and Krishna is with him all the time. And so Maharaji gave this amazing, I hope we have a recording of it. Someone must have been recording it. It was brilliant. But he was basically going, look, he's not a robot. He's not just he's like he's a person. He said, and Maharaj said it's real life. This is not like he's not an actor having to recite the same lines every night, and it's this impersonal thing. So it's real life. So he's got that, he's been given that mission, and now he has this adventure of okay, how am I going to do it? He knows it's going to happen because his guru has asked him to do it, but then he has doubt, and there's all these different emotions and feelings, but he knows not to deviate. So that's, I think devotees, they really crave getting an instruction from their guru. If they get a direct instruction from their spiritual master, it's like best thing in the world. You know, it's great. It's like, okay, bang, I can, you know, it's like, right, I can do it in full surrender. You know, it's one of those times when you know for a fact. But yeah, I always think if you're not sure, just preach, because you know Prabhupada's all right. And that's just me. I'm not saying that's the only way of, you know, dealing with things. But if you're not sure, just preach, and you always know Prabhupada's happy that way. But yeah, it's just me. Anyway, sorry, I don't have anybody else. That was quite a long answer to that question, wasn't it? Hopefully that was all right.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I thought it was very touching how Srila Prabhupada was so upset about his god brothers not following the spiritual master's instructions properly. And he used that opportunity when they were supposed to be celebrating the spiritual master to kind of try and get them to come back into line, as it were, and kind of take it all seriously and do what they were supposed to be doing, because he was so upset that they weren't. So as well as being fixed on his own instructions, he was upset that others weren't doing the same.
That was really heavy, wasn't it, when we read that?
Yeah,
Or when you were reading it, actually, Lucy?
very boldly.
I was thinking, I was there thinking, oh, this is like, what did it say? It wasn't a eulogy, it was an explosion.
Yeah.
Prabhupada erupted, you know. Yeah, no, that passage was amazing. Let the neophytes remain inside the temples and simply ring the bell. And in some of his poetry, he talks about, in that book of poetry, talks about, I mean, he's quite critical of like the kind of sort of Babajis that just stay in the holy place, and the ones that aren't, you know, bona fide, the ones that are meditating on sense gratification and just living in a holy place. He's really like scathing about it. You know?
No, it's somewhere says something like, then how are you any different from the pigeons in the rafters?
Oh yeah,
because you're just,
the pigeon goes to the temple just to eat.
To eat and to sleep. And so he's saying that that's not the purpose of it.
Yeah. Very different from the pigeon. I mean, it takes quite a personality to come out and just say that about, you know.
Yeah.
Because there are people that live in Vrindavan. In one sense, they're like residing in Vrindavan.
Yeah, I think that's probably an example where you definitely shouldn't imitate.
Yeah,
you know, it's like, you can't artificially start trying to just worry about our own.
Call everyone out, yeah.
We're in our own lane.
Yeah. I think it's one of those, you know, when you see also just about the history of like ISKCON and Prabhupada's life, and you see he's so clearly empowered by his spiritual master, because he faithfully follows the orders of his spiritual master. He becomes empowered. And so you can, it's like, I almost, when we heard it, and this is like just my own feelings, I'm not saying it was like an authority, but it's actually not, in one sense, not Prabhupada talking. It's like his guru's talking through him, you know. He's just sort of, that's how I heard it.
Yeah, I thought the same as well. I was just thinking that as you were talking, It's like he was speaking for him,
Yeah, because he had a reputation back to Siddhanta Saraswati. He was obviously, you know, deeply loving person. You know, he wasn't just some like, you know, whatever, but he was, they called him the Simha Guru, Lion Guru, because he was ferocious. We heard about that at the beginning, when we were towards the beginning when we were reading. He was very, very ferocious, and obviously he loved his disciples, but at the same time, that love can have different flavors, you know, and can manifest itself in different ways. So sometimes it needs to be heavy, you know. Like if a child's putting their finger in a plug socket, you don't just politely ask them to take it out. Do you know what I mean? No, he grabbed, you know, it's like you have to be strong. So, yeah, it felt like his guru was speaking to him.
Word of Priya's written, during his final days, Srila Prabhupada asked his godbrothers to forgive him for the things he said in order to do his service, and of course they understood and loved him. Prabhupada also did not want us to speak negatively of his godbrothers, as they are our seniors. Yeah.
It's like something they can do because they're brothers. It's different.
Yeah.
You wouldn't speak about your uncle in the same way that your dad would speak to him.
Yeah.
You know, like, because they're brothers, so they can talk like that, but you can't do it. Yeah. It's a delicate thing, Vaishnav, etiquette. You have to be quite refined. You know, it's a beautiful thing as well.
Yeah.
When you see people acting, when you see like advanced Vaishnavas acting in that way towards each other, a cultured way. It's very, very nice. It was nice when on Sunday night when Manidhar Prabhu, was it on Sunday night? He talked about when Prabhupada went to India.
Yeah.
And they saw
his
him
old friend.
having fun and like relaxing and joking and being affectionate.
Yeah.
Things like that. It's very beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Very nice. Hare Krishna. I don't know what time it is. We went a little bit longer because we wanted to finish that
to
chapter.
the end of the chapter.
You want to get to the end of that chapter, but you want to get to the start of the next one as well, because it's just so much nectar. I don't know if anyone wanted to share anything else. Any last words of wisdom? Maha Mantra, we've heard you read, but we have not heard your devotional outpourings.
I was going to mention one thing, but it kind of got mentioned anyway, about the Japanese saga. I was gripped by it. It was just, you know, he's such a diplomat for spirituality and India as well. But he just scuppered at every attempt. Yeah, I was really feeling for him.
Yeah. And then like Radha Priya was saying, it's not that Prabhupada needs the lesson, but it's like a lesson in you know, like you just have to do the service, and you know, Krishna presents the service, so he sort of diligently goes about doing it, and it doesn't work. Okay, what's the next thing? You know, because it's so focused on the service and not on the result, I suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, you really, I mean, it's just, and he's so lonely, and it's like, you know, you think, oh.
And they know who he is.
Yeah. It's just
I think that's the thing, is like, you know, we're reading it knowing what he's gone on to do, but when you're reading at this point, he doesn't know that yet, and you just, I was also feeling like,
you also want to go up to him and go, no, it's okay, it's going to kick off big time.
You know, sometimes you're reading a book and you want to jump in and say to the character, like, no, it's all going to work out in the end.
I flick to the end, it's going to be, don't sweat it, it's fine. Yeah, it's brilliantly, you can, I mean, I think at the beginning we were reading about how, in the introduction, he talks about how he sought blessings from, like, I mean, Satsarup Maharaj, who wrote this, he sought blessings from his godbrothers. So you kind of feel like the book is authorized because of, you know, the sort of devotional mood in which he approached writing it and seeking blessings from his godbrothers, who he considers his authorities, and so on. And so you can, I mean, God, you can really feel like, you know, like you just makes you fall in love with Prabhupada more, you know, when you hear it. Yeah. In the same, similarly, when Prabhupada's guru and Bhaktisiddhanta is speaking through Prabhupada, you sort of feel like Prabhupada's very much present in this book. You know, it's you can feel its authority there coming through the heart of Satsarup Maharaj. We're very lucky that he took the time to write it. I don't know how much research must have gone into this. It's so really detailed. Incredible. Whether he did all the research himself or not, I don't know. It's like
all the details, like when you're reading about the rooms of Radha Damodar, he's talking about the toad and the little mouse, and it's like got all these little artistic, like that makes it feel like you're like a movie, or you can see it as you're reading it. Radha Priya said, it's a beautiful thing to see you giving these opportunities for us to read together. Thank you. Thank you. It's only so nice because everybody comes and reads together. Otherwise, it would just be us on our own. I mean, that's nice, but this is nicer, and it's. I mean, we're all really blessed that any Prabhupada's disciples want to spend time with us in any way, isn't it? Yeah. You know what I mean? Think about it. You know, Prabhupada's big time.
He's proper big, really serious personality, so we're lucky that Radha Priya wants to hang out with us, the likes of us. Good.
Us
Very nice.
rubble.
Yeah. Okay, that was nectar.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
Absolute nectar. And we got to hear Cecilia read.
Yeah.
Not that you have to read, but that was pretty special, I thought.
Yeah,
it was
It
gorgeous.
was very, very nice.
Beautiful. Yeah. It was what, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I thought it was nice. Just saying. I thought it was great. Thanks very much. I'll put up Sunday evening's class. I'll put that up now.
Oh yeah.
On YouTube or something, because it was great. And I'll put this one up as well.
We'll see everybody.
Yeah.
Again on. Well, we'll be on Facebook tomorrow.
It comes around so fast, doesn't it?
But then Lilamrta again next week.
I'm going to be old soon at this rate. Time keeps flying by. It's crazy.
I've started finding grey hairs.
Anyway, that's enough of that. Thanks, everybody.
On that note,
Hare Krishna. And yeah, thanks. I'm just every week, I know I say it, but thanks so much for doing this. We're so happy to be able to read together. So yeah, thank you. And yeah, we'll see everyone soon, I guess. Yeah.
Have a good week.
Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Hare Bol.